All right, I will stay down here. My thanks to Ilya and my esteemed panelists for a really good discussion. You know, it's remarkable. The case is 10 years old and it's still hot, which tells you this is a very important case, which is talked about. So I think it's actually fitting that mine comes last because I want to approach this case from a slightly different perspective, and that of popular constitutionalism. So what is popular constitutionalism? This is a word which is always thrown about, but it generally refers to the fact that the final interpretive authority of the Constitution rests with the people themselves and not just the courts or the legislatures. This is Professor Larry Kramer's work. And throughout our history, we've always had these various social movements which have competed and contested over the meaning of the Constitution. And historically, you had the abolitionists who looked to the Declaration of Independence. You had the suffragists who looked to the 14th Amendment, which didn't really speak to the gender issue. You had the civil rights era that looked to the founding documents. And in each generation, you have these movements that find our founding charter documents to give credence and support for various constitutional ideals. Barry Friedman's written about the will of the people and how the Supreme Court actually tracks the meaning of where the people are. And I think that this is an interesting framework to view Heller. So I'll give a couple examples first. The first example, which Reva Siegel's written about at length, is D.C.V. Heller. So if I had gone to any law school 30 years ago and I said the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right to keep and bear arms, I would have been laughed out of the classroom. It simply wasn't an argument that people took seriously, but there was a legitimate culture that developed. You had scholarship on the Second Amendment, you had books written, you had dissenting opinions in various cases, and you actually built up a movement where people who perhaps like guns recognize that there is a history of the Second Amendment that protects an individual right. And Reva Siegel wrote this led to decades of mobilization inside and outside the academy. And remarkably, in Justice Scalia's opinion in D.C.V. Heller, the court recognizes. They went almost full in, not quite, but almost full in originalism on the Heller decision. You can agree or not, that's not important for these purposes. But there was definitely a constitutional movement that led to and inspired that. The second example is Obamacare, and we have the godfather himself, Mr. Randy Barnett, in the audience. But there was a seriously strong popular constitutionalist movement concerning the ACA, right? This was not an accident that the movement to push this case forward was simultaneous with the Tea Party. These were concurrent forces that really had a synergy. And you had the challengers saying, hey, listen, right? The Constitution can't make you buy a commercial product. And of course, the meme was, can the government make me buy broccoli? That was the sign everywhere. But you had these two movements with an academic, strong arguments by Randy and others. And you also had this popular movement, people saying, yeah, I don't want the government make me buy this. And these things clashed. And I refer to this as a social movement on steroids. Because within the span of months, not years, Heller took two decades. Within the span of months and maybe a year, the argument that Randy and Ilya and others advanced went from off the wall to on the wall, to use Jack Balkin's language. And then before you know it, you have federal judges invalidating the ACA based on these arguments, which maybe 2 years ago were getting laughed at by your elite law professors at any school you can think of, perhaps the top 12, not the top 14, as one said. And as a plug, I do have a book on this called Unprecedented, the Constitutional Challenge to Obamacare, which Randy wrote the forward to. So let's use Heller and Obamacare as a frame. As Ilya's documented in his book very well, Kelo drew support from a wide range of groups. You have the NAACP, the AARP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, all on the same side of the issue. I don't know any other case that can unite people like this. But before the Kelo case was actually argued, mostly academics were upset about this. People in the mainstream weren't tuned into it. But afterwards, this blew up like a rocket. So I think one difference of the Kelo movement versus the difference with Obamacare and Heller is that there the social movements happened first, right? There was a contestation over meaning before the Supreme Court resolved it. Here, in contrast, the contestation happened after the Supreme Court resolved it, and as Ilya and I would argue, did it wrong, and people were upset at this. So we actually have this thing. I think this gives credence to Judge Posner's comment, where Judge Posner said that the reaction to Kelo is evidence of the decision's pragmatic soundness. I think he's wrong about that part. But the fact is, this let popular constitution work its way through the system. And this took shape in a number of different ways, right? So first you had, as Ilya said, people like Rush Limbaugh and Ralph Nader and all these various groups who usually don't agree coming together. And you actually had 45 states that enact laws. Popular constitutional doesn't have to be fictional, right? It doesn't have to be some ethereal thing, right? People can say, you know what? I want our state constitution to reflect a higher ideal of protection of property rights. And that's a good thing if people actually have this aspiration. Now, whether the reforms did it or not, we can debate that, but they had this thing. As well, another good point that Ilya raises in his book is it wasn't just state legislation, state constitutions, it was state courts. And you actually had judges who, instead of taking their cue from the Supreme Court, like with Berman v. Parker and Hawaii v. Mitkiff, right? Now they're taking the cue from the people, right? The people who were annoyed at Kelo. And to the extent that Barry Friedman's work discusses courts follow the will of the people, Supreme Court got it wrong, state courts got it right. That Kelo was such an unpopular decision that perhaps Stevens and others weren't in line with the will of the people. So we have, at the state level, groups from all across the map saying we need to protect property rights. You have state legislatures amending their state codes, amending their state constitutions. And you have state judges, right? You have state judges actually changing through common law and other means how they interpret these things. One other aspect that I want to discuss is the enduring strength of this. We are a decade removed from Kelo. We're still talking about it, right? Why? Because this still matters to people. Ilya's done surveys on this, right? With all respect, the Obamacare social movement petered out after NFIB, right? The Heller social movement, it's strong, but there hasn't been much stuff in the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court's just ducked the issue altogether. But this issue is still alive and well. And to the extent that Ilya wants his permanent employment from the Supreme Court, this might get revisited, right? I don't think that Kelo is a settled precedent because there's been so much contestation by people of every walk of life at the state level, at every level of courts. And this is an issue where, a liberal gets replaced by a conservative. To the extent that there is a popular constitutionalism and the courts react to this, then yeah, the next eminent domain case that comes up might come out differently. Maybe they will heighten Justice Kennedy's concern for pretextual findings, and maybe they will double back. I mean, it's happened before. Justice O'Connor voted in Mitkiff, and then she voted against herself in Kelo. Right? So people do change their minds. So there's a very good complementarity of this panel. But I think as a whole, the fact that we're still talking about this and keeping this issue alive and well is a reflection that the constitutionalism is not settled. And one more point in Ilya's book, I keep plugging it, he makes an argument about originalism. Ilya makes a point about originalism and how the original meaning of Kelo is very consistent with Justice Thomas's dissent. And this is something that Professor Barnett's written about also. To the extent that the American populace is using popular constitutionalism to go towards the original meaning of the Constitution, that makes me really happy, right? This is not some sort of living constitutionalism. People are trying to restore the lost, to quote Randy's book, to restore the lost Constitution. They're actually trying to bring us closer. That Randy said, there's a gravitational pull of where the Constitution started from, and one of the tenets is protection of property rights. And we can crawl back towards that, even though the Supreme Court messed up along the way. I think that'd be a very salutary development. So I'm going to stop here, and I welcome all of your questions. Thank you all so much.
We're running slightly later with the presentations than we intended.